Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the regular session of the CVRD Board for July 13th, 2022. I'd like to first of all acknowledge that we are having this meeting on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people. And with that, I'd like an approval of the agenda with some added from our Committee of the Whole, that we move forward new business R2, R3, our 4.3 into our board time sensitive. So that's added to the board agenda. So I'm looking for an approval of the agenda. Moved and second. All in favor? Opposed, if any. Motion is carried. I'll go into the adoption of the minutes of June. I'll go there because I just needed to speak to something briefly before we carried on too much longer. The regular board meeting, M1, June 22nd, 2022. I'd like to move that one. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed, if any. Motion is carried. And business arising. Just a second, before the business arising, I'd just like to say a few words from last meeting. And my deepest apologies, our last meeting, while I have everybody here, we forgot to say goodbye and send our gratitude to our CAO, our former CAO, Brian Crothers. So there are some people, if there's anybody that would wish to say a very nice adios amigos to Brian Crothers that was with us for 8 years, and it was I had forgotten to mention that in our last meeting, and I really want to make an effort to say that now and make sure that he is, I just wanted to say goodbye appropriately and thank him, and I forgot to do that last time. So I'm doing that now, and if there's anyone else that wishes to say a few words, I'll wait for a minute before I do the adoption of the minutes. Seeing none. Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead, Lynn. Director Smith.
I just wanted you all to know that I met Brian this morning out walking in, of course, Saltaire, and he looks like he's a very happy man. And I reminded him that the meeting started at 9:30 this morning, so he should hurry home. And he laughed all the way. So he's definitely enjoying his retirement.
That's great, and we really appreciated all the time that he had with us, and we hope that he has a great retirement too. And there's a wonderful virtual hand of applause. Thank you so much. Moving on now to business arising from the minutes, Mr. Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is under BA1, reconsideration of motion 22-367-7 from the June 8th 2022 regular board meeting. This is authorized the chair under Local Government Act Section 217. And the recommendation that a letter of concurrence be provided to Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada in response to proposed telecommunication facility at Tipperary Road, PID 001-229-346. That recommendation is the motion that is being brought forward under this item for reconsideration.
Thank you. Turn to Director Morrison. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to bring to your attention, I had a number of people reach out, and we're hoping that, and I don't know if they're in the room or not, but we're hoping to be able to provide some public input on this this matter, and wasn't aware of the order and the timing of the agenda when you first introduced it, and wondering if you would, if there are people either in the lineup, or I don't know if there are, if they could be given the opportunity to provide input to the board.
How would we, Mr. Robbins?
At the direction of the board, if you'd like to reorder, and if there are, I know that there are people here in the gallery. I'm not sure if they are speaking to this. They may be. We can confirm whether they are not, and it's up to the board if you'd like to reorganize your agenda to hear for them before you hear the reconsideration.
Is there anyone in the gallery that wishes to speak on the Tipperary Road? I do have two people. So would we need a motion to reorder?
Correct.
Go ahead, Director Sebring.
I'll make the motion that we reorder the agenda to put be a 1 after item 5 on the agenda, the public input period.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. So I will ask, and I'm not sure if Mr. Robbins has anybody public input on electronically, but I do have two people in the gallery that wish to speak, so you each have 3 minutes. Go ahead, please, and come to the podium. Welcome, Mr. Lees. Okay, thank you. Want to lift up the microphone? I think, there we go. Oh, helps to turn it on.
Always helps if you turn it on.
Always
Newfangled
does.
gadgets.
Welcome.
I'd just like to talk to the
And your name,
decision.
sorry, could you just?
Michael
introduce
Lees,
us?
4948 Arla Court, Satlam, British Columbia.
Thank you.
I'd just like to talk to the decision that was made previously, including after a decision was made by the Electoral Area Services Committee, that in the further meeting that a vote was held and that was overruled, giving permission for that. While I know that probably legally, because it was a federal issue, that municipalities in the city and other areas can vote on that, but I felt that it was a little bit of meddling in my area. I made it clear in my email that I personally, just in the last little while, have suffered some problems communicating with my wife from Gold River. Telephone was down for 8 days at TELUS, and which meant running a new line from the road all the way up to my house. So, yeah, that was taken care of. The lack of communication in Satlam has been an issue for years and years and years. As a volunteer fire chief on the highway, they asked me to call dispatch, and I can't call dispatch because of the fact that I don't have any cell service. People have to drive for miles and miles and miles to get cell service to report accidents on the highway. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had a person that burned to death on the highway in a car accident, and no reporting on it in the paper, but it happened, and how much time could have been saved if they would have had cell service in the location that they were at. The community itself as a whole is in favor of having cell service, but the locations are problems, and I think this one is site specific. But the fact is that somewhere somebody is going to have to come along and make a decision on where these things are going to be situated. There are several locations that they could put them, but that's going to have to be decided. But we can't chase telecommunications companies away to decisions that we make. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You were right under your 3 minutes. Thanks, Mike. And go ahead if there's somebody else that wishes to speak.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members.
Good afternoon.
My name is Susan Kaufman, and I live in Satlam, and I live in the area where the cell tower is proposed. There is no doubt that people living in the area wish to have cell service, but the reality is that we live in a rural area, and we have to be respectful of the people who are most affected by the placement of telecommunications towers. And I was very disappointed to see TELUS come back to our neighborhood after the Hanks Road situation a little over a year ago. And I'm also disappointed that this board did not move after that to adopt a cell tower placement policy like many of the member municipalities have that belong to the Cowichan Valley Regional District. I do not know the outcome of the legal opinion that was sought on the vote that was held, and I respect the process, but I hope that the directors, the municipal directors, are respectful of the vote that they gave before, if they're allowed to use it, And I thank the electoral area directors that supported our director, who, after all, does know her community best. It's not that we don't want cell service, we do. It's where those cell towers are placed. So I would implore the electoral area directors who did not support Director Allison and those people most affected by the placement of this tower to reconsider and to move forward with a cell tower placement policy in an expedient way so that no other neighborhoods have to go through this divisive process again. And I'd also like to reiterate that the TELUS did not come to this board with options of where to place the tower. They came back within approximately a kilometer of the other proposed site that was soundly rejected to the point where TELUS actually withdrew their application. So I urge you to reconsider your votes and to please move forward on a cell tower policy. Do not wait for the MOC process. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else for public input? Seeing none, we will go back to the business arising from the minutes. Number 4, Mr. Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With your reconsideration, the motion is considered live before the board.
So it doesn't need a seconder.
No.
Okay. So I just called, is there any more discussion? Go ahead, Director Stone.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the discussion that happened previously. And it wasn't that at least from my perspective, my vote wasn't because I wanted to see the tower denied. It was just reflecting on both North Couch and Town of Ladysmith. When we received those applications, we're able to defer that consideration and pass a policy that allowed for greater community engagement with the immediate neighbors before the consideration of the matter. So, however that ended up the way it ended up, it wasn't, in my mind, at least my vote was not intended to defeat the cell tower, but to give time to the CVRD to put forward a policy, much like North Cowichan did, and our staff used the North Cowichan policy as a guideline to develop our own policy, and then we considered the placement of the cell tower under that policy that it allowed for better community engagement before the consideration by the council. So I just want to make it clear that the intention for my vote was not to defeat it, but was to give staff the opportunity to develop a policy that would allow for the necessary community engagement to happen before a vote by the board. So that was how I understood it. If that's not how it works in the regional district, or staff was unable to develop that policy before consideration of the item, that's fair. But just want that to be clear that it was never my intent to say, sorry, no cell phones in Satlam, but was that the community engagement is provided within the legislation to allow the local government to pass a policy that gives the community the right to speak on it before, through a formal local government process before the consideration by the board or council. So just wanted to be clear on what my perspective was in that previous discussion and reiterate what my perspective was at that time, which was to get a policy in place at the CVRD like North Cowichan and the Town of Ladysmith and perhaps other municipalities have. Thanks.
Okay, I turn to Director Nicholson and then Director Sebring.
Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you to all the people that have took time to send me their thoughts about this particular cell tower location. It's certainly controversial in Salem, and it is actually controversial throughout Area E. I've got comments from throughout Area E about people who oppose cell towers in their backyards or who really want cell service. And I think that that's the distinguishing thing for me. I do not have enough information to understand whether the people who really desire cell service are prepared to have it in residential areas, in effect in their backyards. And I think for that reason, it's very important for the CBRD to go through a process of developing a cell tower siting policy, going out to the community to have a conversation with them to really understand what the issues are and whether we can come to some mutual agreement on what a policy would be in the best interest for the community. We don't have that yet, but it was just very curious to me. I decided I would Google cell phone controversies in the CBRD, and I found that this conversation has gone back well before my time. In 2011, there was a proposal on Saltaire that was hotly debated. In 2013, in the minutes, they talk about minutes of March 5th, they talk about a report from planning about that had a cell tower protocol policy and referring it to a future EASC meeting. And I guess I'm not sure what that 2013 policy draft was, but I do regret that that process was not completed, because I think if we had a policy in place today, it would be much easier to make a decision in this particular case. So I know now that staff have developed a draft policy, and I really would like to see that not wait till the modernization of the OCP process carries on. I would like to see that brought forward and brought out to the community for discussion, because I think we're going to get more requests like this coming up, because there's funding going into the system for connectivity. So for that reason, I am not supporting this proposal at this time, and I would like to make a motion that we bring forward the policy for community discussion.
Currently.
Yes, well, when we finish with that.
Yes,
Thank you.
Okay, turn to Ms. Cheroff. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so just for the information of the board, the report requesting the concurrence for the cell tower was received on June the 8th, and there was a motion put forward that was defeated. There was no other motion that was passed at that meeting. The strategic initiative staff are working on a cell tower siting policy, which has been spoken to and is located within the draft modern OCP document. And in conjunction with that, they're also working on a consultation policy. And so that consultation policy would be what the CVRD would require proponents to use in lieu of the federally mandated consultation policy that they're required to follow in cases where local governments don't have a policy. So a policy has been followed in this case. It is the federal policy. Staff are working on a CVRD specific policy that will be coming back to the Electoral Area Services Committee, or perhaps Committee of the Whole, we anticipate in September.
Okay, thank you. I turn to Director Sebring and then Director Marsh. I don't know if I had anyone else.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Director Marsh did some very stellar work in developing and driving the North Cowichan cell policy, and I want to acknowledge that. We've heard from Director Nicholson, and we've heard during public input, and we also heard from Director Stone that we don't really want to say yay or nay to this particular request until we develop the policy. And I guess I would ask staff, and I don't know whether it's Ms. Cheroff or somebody else, what the sort of deadlines involved here are. I do believe that when somebody like TELUS makes an application to ISED, that they have a certain window in which to get that thing completed, or it falls off the table. I could be wrong on that, but would we have time to put this piece in abeyance until we develop a policy, or does that mean that in effect we kill this particular proposal? Because I don't want to kill this proposal. I take very much to heart what I heard about, and I've experienced it myself, the lack of cell coverage along that fairly major thoroughfare between here and Lake Cowichan. I think it's important that we get cell coverage there. We've waited this long, and if it's a matter of a few weeks, that's fine. But if it's a matter of we wait for a staff report in September, and by then this particular proposal is off the table, and they got to come back again, and now it's a year. That's quite a difference between a few weeks and a year, and I'm not sure I want to wait a year. So I guess to Ms. Chirolf, are there deadlines that TELUS is facing here with their application to the federal government that we need to be aware of as we look at the sort of dichotomy between doing this now or waiting for a policy to be developed?
Ms. Charoff.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Director Sebring. I'm not aware of the federal timelines post consultation. I believe that would be, my sense is that the regulator probably has some discretion. And my sense also is that if the board were to put forward a resolution asking for the regulator to withhold its decision until such time as the CBRD has completed its own process, and provided that time frame is reasonable, they may be willing to withhold their decision on that particular file.
Thank you.
I was just informed we have some TELUS. We have Doug from TELUS. If you have any questions for TELUS, or if he could inform us on any questions that have been asked, welcome. And if there's anything that you can answer there on timelines, that might be appreciated.
Hi, yes, Doug here from TELUS. I'm joined also with my colleague Brian. And so together, I'm sure we can answer any questions that the board may have. Just on that last question about timeline. So I think the point of confusion may be that there are timelines that the federal government has put in place. And really what they're meant to do is, it's basically about a 180-day timeline that consultation should occur within. And that's a guideline, but that's to try to ensure that these processes don't go on too long. There's no stale dating with the federal government in terms of when we would go and seek decision or approval, and it doesn't actually really quite work like that. But I guess what I would say is that there, certainly within TELUS, there's timelines, and a matter of months delay can mean a delay in a year, or even sometimes 2 years in terms of our build schedule. And I guess just as another point, just picking up on the conversation, I would be interested to know, sort of how this would play out if there was a new policy that came into place that then was, retroactively applied to this proposal that TELUS has had for quite a while now. I mean, we've been working at this for almost 2 years. And if there were certain restrictions in that new policy, if it were aligned with, some of the other local governments in the area, how the board would handle that. Not something to answer today, but when we look at some of these other policies and there's 500 meters from residential areas, this site is not that, and there's almost no sites that I'm aware of that are that far from residences. So just wanted to note that as well. It's a point of caution. I mean, 500 meters from residences usually means no service. That's really what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Thank you. I turn to Director Marsh. You have a question for staff or TELUS?
No, I don't, Madam Chair,
Yes,
but I
Director
did
Wilson,
have.
I've seen your hand. You're next on my list. And then
I did have some comments, but I was looking for something, so I've misplaced them. But it is my understanding that whatever a council or a board decides on concurrence, that ISED reserves the right to overrule that. They do look at it, but they don't necessarily agree with it. So just building a little bit further on what Director Stone said, in the North Cowichan policy, which I researched many policies, and in order to come up with my recommendation, and then our wonderful manager of planning, Chris Osborne, made it shorter and more concise. However, the sites that are most discouraged in terms of siting cell towers are, and I'll say in the order of most discouraged up to encouraged. So adjacent to residential areas, parks, green spaces, golf courses and sports grounds, downtown or other commercial areas, agricultural, forested and rural areas, institutional sites. So now we're coming up, there's only 3 more. This is kind of, to me, where it starts to feel like it's okay. Institutional sites, including those that typically require telecommunications technology, such as hospitals, research centers, college, public works facilities, but not including schools, which is kind of an interesting thing to note. Commercial and industrial sites remote from residential areas, and transportation and utility corridors. So given that a decision like that, this is going to stand for a really, really long time, no pun intended, and given that there is a draft policy and that people are very passionate about it, and I have been watching social media, and there is a person that's been trying to get things up. I expected thousands of letters, hundreds of letters, dozens of letters. I think I only got one letter that was that wanted this to go ahead, and everyone else did not like the location. So I won't be changing my vote, but like Director Stone, this doesn't mean I don't believe that this area needs self-coverage. I just believe that there's a better way to do it. And I'll just end by saying part of our policy, and I understand ISIT, it's part of them too, but it's been a while since I did this. It's been a year. They prefer it to be something that somebody else could share later, like so you can build on it, other carriers. And I think, if we just think about what happened with Rogers last week, and how people had no coverage whatsoever, it makes sense to start to kind of integrate this. And also, perhaps we should, in our rural areas in the meantime and going forward, because, these systems do go down at times, maybe we should have our fire departments have ham radios and those kinds of things so they can communicate together when there is an emergency. But at this point, given that there is a policy on its way, given that the director and the people that have contacted me, all save one from the region, do not prefer this site, I will not be supporting it. Once again, no offense to the young dudes who came along to share, but I think we can do better, and I think you'll be glad of it. Thank you.
Mr. Brian Gregg, go ahead, please. Tell us.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I think all of these comments are really helpful for us to take into account. I just thought, if I may, I have a few pieces of feedback to provide, just because I was the individual who sort of took this proposal through the consultation process, and I have also been engaged in some files for a number of clients in the municipality of North Cowichan, so I'm quite familiar with the process that's been adopted there, as well as in the city of Duncan. I guess my first question or comment, and I'm not really looking for...
Madam Chair, I just have a point of order. Are we to include a proponent who stands to make money for their company to debate us when we're making a decision?
We have questions about TELUS currently, and then they're here to answer those questions that we can't as staff. So
I understand that, but
there's been questions that have been asked that we have not been able to answer. So for everybody to clearly be ready for their vote, once again, we need to have these.
So you're then saying to the proponents that they have permission to answer
all the information possible. Thank you.
Oh, they're allowed to say things that we didn't ask?
He's commenting on what we've asked, because
that's just what I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Gregg.
Thank you. I'll do my best to stay on track in the bounds of what's been discussed. So the first topic is the idea of a new policy, which I believe Director Marsh specifically has brought up here, as well as in municipality of North Cowichan. My first question or comment is whether or not, even if a new policy were adopted or created, it would apply to in-stream applications. Indeed, with other types of development proposals, I don't think that that's how it would typically work. I think TELUS, we're in the business of cooperating. We do want to garner support through the board and the municipal governments that we're working within, and as well as community members. So, this isn't intended to be whatsoever a heavy-handed remark, but I think it is food for thought as to whether or not it would be appropriate to basically stall purposefully an in-stream application of any kind right before or during a decision-making process, adopt a new policy or protocol, and and to try to apply that to a proposal that already was adhering to a clear process that was in place at the time. I'm not sure that that would be necessarily correct process. Second thing I wanted to add was that Doug mentioned a 180-day timeline for making these decisions, and I just double-checked. It's actually in the ISED CPC, which is sort of our policy Bible, if you will, and it's a 120-day process, actually, that the federal government encourages local governments to stick to. So, we're supposed to basically be, from the start to the end, to be able to conclude these proposals within a 120-day timeline. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule. I don't think anyone's going to come down with a hammer and sort of enforce that or anything, but, we've been, again, working on this for the better part of, it's approaching 2 years. We've clearly exceeded that. It is what it is. It often happens, but indeed, it's a 120-day time frame is what it's supposed to be. The final thing I guess I wanted to touch on, and I think it's the most important, at least from my perspective, is that while I can understand the desire for good process and perhaps indeed a new policy, I think it's noteworthy that Doug and I have talked about this extensively. What we've tried to do here is really listen to the community. This proposal is driven in the first place by longstanding requests for service in the Satlam community. We acknowledge that our first proposal at 5571 Hanks Road resulted in actually a lot of community pushback. And so we think what we tried to do was listen to that and sort of self-regulate, if you will. And we canceled that proposal before even requesting any decision. We discharged a right-of-way agreement from title voluntarily and started over looking for a new location, even though it took us about a year and there's quite a bit of cost for that. And so this is, just as a reminder, our second proposal for this area. And through this revised consultation process, we redid our newspaper notices, our mail out to area residents, extended a new comment period, and we actually got almost 70% support for this revised proposal. So it actually went really well, and there was extensive community input. And actually, a number of community members during the prior proposal specifically recommended that we look at this exact location that we're in. And I think the fact that we got nearly 70% support from those who commented is a testament to the fact that, we did listen, and by and large, most people felt that it was a supportable proposal. So those are our thoughts. We sincerely want to deliver service without further delay. If this goes on much longer, all of these proposals fall into a larger capital and build plan, as Doug noted, and there's always some risk that with delay, these investments end up just happening in other areas, and we're sincerely trying to move forward as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Director Wilson and Director Acton, and actually Director Toporowski. So go ahead, Director Wilson, and then I'll go turn to Acton.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Director Marsh has already mentioned the Rogers debacle that happened a few days ago. The repercussions were absolutely immense as far as I can make out. The cell phone coverage in my area here in Cobble Hill is very, very poor. Sorry, TELUS, but it is. But I'm lucky in as much that I have the facility for Wi-Fi calling, which means that I can have good coverage wherever I am in my particular area. So the question remains here. Given that the federal government has, and mandated might not be the right word, that telecoms providers form a cooperative or service restoration plan to work together in the event of another serious outage, such as the Rogers one, would the addition of and I know that you guys all share towers, which is a great idea, would the addition of that particular tower in that area have made the consequences that much less on the local Satlam area, or in that respect any area where Rogers was being served, if there was this cooperation restoration plan in place?
Who would like to answer that?
I could speak to that through the chair. So, and thank you. And I'm not, everything happened quite recently with Rogers outage. And I think, we're still learning about that and still learning how, the regulatory response to that you had referenced there. But what I can tell you is that regardless of that and what may come of this situation, with the cell tower in an area like Satlam where there is essentially no cell service at present, 911 calls can be made from any device, if there's an emergency. And so I think that's an important thing to consider. That's already a regulation that's in place. And so in an emergency situation, anybody with a phone essentially can use that network. The other thing to note too is that co-location on towers is very common, as is network sharing as well. We're seeing more and more of that. So there's a number of different federal government regulations that do contribute to access to networks from different customers and users.
Yeah, thank you very much. Do you have a very quick follow-up, please, Madam Chair? Yeah, I more a comment than anything. I wasn't aware that the 911 service was still accessible. And I think this is a point which has been brought up previously by one of the earlier speakers, that they basically don't have a 911 service up there because they have to drive a considerable distance to actually find coverage. But thank you for your answers.
Thank you. I turn to Director Acton, then Director Toporowski. Go ahead, Director Acton.
Yeah, thank you. So originally when this was at Electoral Area Services, Director Nicholson was the only one opposed. And then the information that came forward, that she brought forward about the policy, made sense in the moment at the board. I'm not so sure that my decision to go that route was, it is a challenge. This is a really difficult decision. TELUS has done this twice. I don't know how many times we would expect. They are a business, so I don't know how many times we would expect, an offer for a cell tower to go up. And to the contrary, I've actually had more emails and phone calls on this of people who are upset with the decision to vote against it since that board decision. And there was actually a gentleman on Monday afternoon that I spoke to, and he's leaving Shawnigan and retiring in Satlam. So that's why he reached out to me, and he was in tears because they're very remote and, they're quite senior, and they often don't have cell service, and they don't have internet either. So they have no way if to get a hold of a family member or, so that caused him, a great deal of anxiety. So I really think that, and looking at the numbers of 30%, it was something like 30% were against versus 70% who were for. When we see controversial items at this table, it's usually only the people who are against that speak up. So I think it's a tough decision, and either this one is just kind of like teetering right there, but I think it's important, and definitely communities who are still in need want that service. So anyway, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I still have Director Toporowski, Director Martman, Director Nicholson, and Director Smith. And hopefully it's new information because we have two delegations here that would like to speak as well. So they are in our gallery. So I'd like to be respectful for them too. So go ahead, Director Toporowski.
Thank you. I just, for one, I just wanted to say, can the motion be reread before we vote on it?
Yes, I will.
Okay. I wasn't here during that first time that this came to the table, but listening to others and all the information that's coming in, I think about the safety of my family and my friends, family members that are going out to remote areas to collect medicine, their safety, having that extra, line of communication to have, being out and doing your rituals in different areas, and also my brother, when he was fishing, it was quite worrisome because there is spotty cell service. And if there was anything that happened, having to drive somewhere to get cell reception to find, the 911 service working. Luckily, I haven't had to use the 911 service while being out there. So I don't know if it actually works. So that's the other thing. So I just wanted to share that about the safety of our community members and just previous comment about seniors. And we're going to have more seniors needing to have that communication. But yeah, so that's all I wanted to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Toporowski. We will be reading it out. Just going to go to who hasn't spoken? Director Martman, then Director Smith. I believe the two of you haven't spoken on this. So Director Martman, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. And, I think all comments are really important, but I do have a question and then a follow-up, if I may. The question is through to staff about our process from going from committee to board, because I know at committee we had a staff report and 5 attachments. One of the attachments was an 87-page report on the public consultation done by TELUS. And I just wanted to know that got through to the board members that weren't on the committee. And can I have that confirmed, that we're all working with the same information and had a chance to read it?
Go ahead, Mr. Robbins.
Madam Chair, it isn't part of the process that when recommendations come, that entire package has come back to the board. So that isn't the process at this time. That information is available, so when it does hit the board, board members do have access, certainly from committee meetings, EACS meetings, and all that information is available for them.
Thank you. Follow up?
So the follow-up, when I started as a very new director, one of the very first things I was told by another very experienced director is, you have to read all the information. Your job is to read it, understand, listen to others, try to understand all the points of views before you come to a conclusion. And I guess I would also put that out. I think that was great advice back then. It's advice I still use. And it's the same thing as everybody read all the information that came through the committee, because that is important. The last comment is about the 911 service. And this is my background. This is where I come from. And people talk about getting hold of 911 and then having an ambulance, fire, police respond. But that's not, and there's always a delay. So the piece that people miss, though, is that there's no delay in care when you get hold of 911. Because that's what the dispatchers are trained for. You get hold of a dispatcher, they will tell you how to do CPR. They will tell you how to stop a bleed. They will tell you how to position the patient that's having a stroke or having a seizure. These things are immediate. You don't want to be driving down the road 2 miles away from where that patient is and have no way to do that immediate first care that is done by that bystander. And that's so critical that I just can't see delaying this for people that don't have that. So thank you for putting up for that.
No, thank you very much. I turn to Director Smith.
Thank you. I have a question for the TELUS reps that are in the meeting today. One of the emails I received indicated that there was an option possibly of an industrial or area that's not too far from here with maybe an additional height added to the tower. And I was just wondering if that option had been explored.
I can briefly comment on that. So I'm not aware of a specifically an industrial zoned property within our search area. A number of ideas have been as is often the case, suggested through the consultation. But there's nothing within the target service area where TELUS desires to propose the infrastructure for service reasons that would sort of meet that classification that you're mentioning.
Thank you. Follow-up, Director Smith? I can turn to Director. Okay, so I have Director Sebring and Director Nicholson to close. Director Sebring, go ahead, please.
Two very, very quick points. Thank you, Madam Chair. The first is to Director Martman's question about, do us municipal directors have access to all the background? I make it my practice, if there's something coming from EASC or another committee that I'm interested in, I'll go back to that committee meeting and drill into the agenda and read the reports there. They're not attached for us at the board, and I think that's best practice, and most of us municipal folks do that. The second piece, and I just wanted to clear up some confusion about the 911 thing. Somebody said, well, there's now a requirement that all devices should be able to reach 911. I have a little BlackBerry sitting at home. I use it as my alarm clock, but it still has that 911 button, which if I hit, it'll dial 911. I have no idea what network it goes on. Probably TELUS, I don't know, because that's the strongest signal where I am. But the point is, you still need to be in cell coverage range for that function to work. This is not a case of if you've got an old cell phone and you push the button, you're going to get 911 no matter where you are. You still need cell coverage, and there is no cell coverage on Highway 18. I just wanted to clarify that requirement doesn't fix the problem that this cell tower is trying to address. Thank you.
Director Nicholson to close, please.
Thank you. TELUS, I have a question for TELUS. When the first site, which is on Hanks Road, was contemplated, and the community, the neighborhood around there was very much opposed to that, this current site is just around the corner, so the neighbors haven't changed their minds, I don't think, about this site. Certainly not from the ones that have contacted me. But what I am wondering is, I did have a conversation with you at some point about exploring other industrial or commercial sites, and it's not clear to me, and I get that Salem, and like many of our areas, have poor cell phone coverage and would like better cell phone coverage, but it's not clear to me that what the options are. We are really focused on this one residential area, and it is a residential area, and that is what concerns me, because the people in that immediate residential area are not happy about this application. So what are the other options?
I can briefly touch on that, and I think Doug may be able to top up further on, hypothetical options or what the search area generally is. But your first comment was around that the neighbors haven't changed, and therefore perhaps from the ones you've heard that their perceptions or comments would still be the same. Certainly in a small number of cases, people continued to reiterate their original similar types of responses. So same comments relative to the prior proposal and reapplied again to this new proposal. However, actually, I think a number of people did not state the same concerns, and that's reflected in the results, wherein here we got 70% support. And many of the neighbors that previously had questions or concerns either opted to not comment or didn't have concerns any longer, to the best of our knowledge, through this process. So I think the results were actually markedly different, substantially different, and we did a lot better this time around. And that really was the goal. We did try to listen, and again, just to reiterate, this revised proposed location was specifically recommended by some of the neighbors. We did hear from some folks specifically saying, why can't you move the tower, further up towards the end of Hanks Road, near the Tipperary Road dedication, near the forested lands up there, and that's exactly what we've done. My second comment would be, I do recall our discussion about a year ago, or maybe a little less, after the previous consultation, and you had, I believe, perhaps recommended a location out in Powley, and noted that there might be some lands out there that might be appropriate in your mind. From an engineering standpoint, and in terms of the coverage we're trying to achieve for Salem and tying it into our network, that's a completely different search area. It's just way outside of where TELUS is aiming to service. It's sort of not even within the realm of where we would be looking. As the network matures, the locations where we need the infrastructure to tie into the existing network become a lot more concentrated. And Doug, maybe you may want to top up on that.
Just a few quick thoughts, if I may, Madam Chair, if we still have time.
Yeah, go ahead quickly, please.
Okay, yeah. I think just the first thing, just to reiterate, I mean, I think this is a definitely a different location. It's tucked away. I've been to the site several times, been to Salem several times, and I think it is a much better location than the first. And also, just to note, also there, when we make a proposal, there's not a lot of different places that we can propose, and quite often there's only one, and it takes us sometimes years just to get everything in place in order to gain the rights to that, in this case, a piece of private property in an area that's going to serve the most amount of people as possible. So that's a challenge. It's very time consuming and challenging to find a location to put the infrastructure, and it's taken us we've scoured basically Salem, and this is what we've come up with that we think is defendable and also meets the needs of the community. So.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call the question. I'm going to have Mr. Robbins read. I'm going to have him read.
May I have a follow-up, please?
You had quite a few follow-ups. We really wanted to get a moving here. Go ahead quickly.
Well, it sounds...
3 times.
I would just like clarification on whether this is going to solve the lack of cell phone coverage along Highway 18.
So, Highway 18 is quite long, and really, what we're talking about is the Satlam community as well. So that's the really the coverage objective is as much of that community as we can possibly cover, right? And then there will be some spillover, but it's not going to be all of Highway 18 would require several cell sites to cover that, and that would be a different objective.
Okay, I'm going to have Mr. Robbins read the recommendation, and I'm going to call the question.
Actually, it's a live motion, and that motion is that a letter of concurrence be provided to Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada in response to a proposed telecommunications facility at Tipperary Road, PID 001-229-346.
Okay, all in favor?
Madam Chair, you had recognized me about 10 minutes ago, but then you didn't come back to me.
I was calling the question. I didn't you had your chance. I don't recall that. You're not on my list?
Well, it'll be on the video.
Apologies.
It'll be on the video feed.
Now calling the question, so we're in the middle of that. So would you like to read it again, please?
Certainly. That a letter of concurrence be provided to Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada in response to proposed telecommunication facility at Tipperary Road, PID 001-229-346.
All in favor? Opposed, if any? I have 1 opposed, Director Nicholson. Motion is... And Marsh. Sorry, my apologies. Motion is carried. Thank you. And with that, we'll turn to our first delegation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Rutherford is here in the gallery with us. He's the Executive Director with the Cowichan Watershed Board, and he's going to speak to you on the Cowichan Watershed Board's 2021 annual report and business plan. I note that before the meeting, he was requesting a little longer time, and if the board would give consideration and a motion to go beyond the 15 minutes.
Yeah, it's been moved, seconded. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion's carried. Welcome, Tom. And you have some extra time.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here in person. It's been over 2 years since I've been in this room, and I have to tell you, I've never thought of it as a particularly friendly room, but I find it really friendly today. It's just nice to be here. So
that's because you're retiring. You're
maybe that's
you're
got
in a
something
friendly
to do
mood.
with it. I am.
Yes.
Not quite Brian Crothers, but getting close. So I had a slide deck as a PDF.
Coming up.
Okay, and so I have to provide regrets from Dr. Shannon Waters, who was going to accompany me in this presentation. She's at a medical conference in Vancouver, and I made the mistake of telling her to be ready at 1:30, forgetting the hard business that this board deals with. So she took 45 minutes away from the
dear.
conference, and
Sorry.
that's why I was texting in the back. I wasn't being rude. So we've lost Shannon. So the first few slides were hers. So I'm just going to skip through those. So if I can, so now this is a PDF, so it's not, oh, okay. Okay, thank you very much. There we go. So these slides were Shannon's, and I'm sure they were extremely informative, but I'm not qualified to speak to them. So I'm going to start here. I think everybody here knows this, right? The Watershed Board's been around for 12 years now, if I do the math. It's a unique partnership between the largest First Nation in BC, and if I may say so, one of the more progressive local governments in BC. It's co-chaired by the Chief of Tribes and the Chair of the District. And it's an action-oriented board that's focused on water and watershed sustainability. You know this, so I'm not going to dwell on it. But what I would like to do today, as per our governance manual, is to present our annual report from last year and our business plan for this year. And so you have those documents in your meeting package. I'm not going to go through them like in detail, but I've picked out maybe 2 or 3 points from each that I think will be useful to touch on. So I'd like to start out the cover art on our annual report is from one of our board members. And Stuart commented on this, that he feels this represents the determination that the salmon in our watershed have demonstrated in surviving. I like it for that, but I also like it because in my mind, the 2 salmon represent the partners. Not that I'm calling you salmon, but I think it's a good depiction. And I would say, just commenting on Stuart's thoughts, that I think it's important for all of us, particularly you as community leaders, to demonstrate that same determination when it comes to the health of our communities and our watersheds. The other thing off the top I'd like to say is that 2021 was not a great year. We did not have a plague of locusts, but we had just about everything else, right? We had floods, we had drought, we had COVID, of course. So it was not an easy year for any of us. And yet, despite this, the partners represented by the board got an awful lot of work done and an awful lot of positive work done, and I'm really proud of that. The other thing that's mentioned in the report off the top is that not only did we accomplish a lot, we're really proud of the way we accomplished it, right? The board focuses on partnerships, and I will overuse that word in the next 15 minutes because I feel it's really important. And the board really works hard to build bridges and to support our partners and the aspirations of our partners. So we're all about collaboration. It's not just about getting things done, it's about bringing the community along with us. Something else that I think it's important in our annual report, obviously, is what we accomplished. A few highlights with our partners. We're making progress, as you know, as board members, with a water sustainability solution for the Cowichan River through an increased weir. We're working to facilitate the first water sustainability plan in BC, in the Coquille watershed, the largest sub-basin in the Cowichan. I spent all morning today glued to my Zoom screen with the steering committee for that process, and it's very exciting. And we, once again, are showing leadership in local watershed governance here in the Cowichan. We were able to recruit a large amount of grant money, and this year we did a lot of good work on the Coquille watershed, which is kind of a forgotten watershed in our community. There's a lot of heat and light for good reason on the Cowichan. But the Coquille, which according to Cowichan traditional beliefs is where the first man came to earth, and a very significant watershed for that and other reasons, has been really ignored. And we've been really able to do a lot of strong technical work there. On the fun side, we now have a 6-foot dancing Chinook mascot, Stakwi, who's made quite an impression on social media, TikTok, Instagram, our YouTube channel, to really deliver the watershed stewardship message in a really fun way. And we've made a lot of progress on technical work, from salmon stock assessment to riparian restoration. So as I said, a lot of work done in the watershed. In the annual report, you will see some tables and spreadsheets around budget. I'm not going to share those, but I thought I'd share this graphic, which to me demonstrates a lot. We receive $50,000 from CVRD, which we rely on and we're really thankful for. But the point I'd like to make is that money allows us to leverage a lot more resources. So we leverage taxpayer money by over 1,000%. And so we feel that that's a pretty good investment of the taxpayers of the area, because that money goes into the area and water and watershed sustainability initiatives. So the final point I'd make on the money end is the money we receive from CVRD allows us to leverage that, right? That's what pays for writing the grants. That's what pays for our board meetings and our decision-making process. So it's extremely important to us, and we're really grateful for it. This slide just demonstrates, I talk about partnerships. These are our partners for the last year. So it's a list, you don't have to read it, but it kind of demonstrates that we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. We don't do our work unilaterally. Everything we do, we engage partners, and you'll see the scope and the scale of the people we work with on this slide. So that's a really quick summary of last year. Now, looking forward, we have a business plan every year that we prepare, share with our board, with the chief and council, and then with you. So really quickly, the highlights of that, we need some priorities. I once worked for a fellow that said a lot of things to me that I ignored, but he said some things that I didn't ignore. And one of them was, if you've got more than 3 priorities, you've got no priorities. You've got a shopping list. We always have our 3 things that we really want to focus on. One is water sustainability, and of course that's the work here in the watershed on the Weir and in the Cookside on the planning process. And I would say it's the same problem, right? With climate change, we're having real problems maintaining water discharge in the summer for environmental reasons, for economic interests, but it's a different solution. In the Cowichan, because of the lake, we have a techno fix. We don't have that opportunity in the Cookside. The only thing we can play with, the only levers we can pull are water use and land use. And that's where the planning piece comes in. We want to work towards achieving our targets. As most of you know, we have 7 broadly scoped targets for water sustainability, ranging from fish health to estuarine health to water conservation. So we're really putting a lot of effort in that this year, and we've received grant money from the Real Estate Foundation of BC to maintain and retain, I guess, a target coordinator. So someone to help us, to provide us with a little more capacity to empower our target working groups. And thirdly, there's the partnership word again. Partnerships are not static things. They need care and feeding. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but our third and significant priority is to keep on building and maintaining our partnerships. So what areas of impact? Like, it's obvious, the water sustainability piece. We're really trying to take those first halting steps down what we feel is a path of reconciliation. We live in BC in 2022, right? This is the land of DRIPA, so we're trying to focus on doing things in a better way, acknowledging that our tax base here, all the land we live on, is unceded territory of the Cowichan people. And we want to focus our work in that way. We want to bring the community along with us. Some of these things we're doing, some of the work we're doing, are going to require people to change behaviors, to change how they use land and water. The Watershed Board is really well positioned to reach out to people, to explain issues, to bring the general population along with us. It's not enough for community leaders or for people who have a technical background to embrace these things, right? We need to have school teachers and truck drivers and like farmers, like understand that we need to do our business a little bit differently around water. So these are some of the key areas of impact that we hope our priorities are going to lead us to. And we're looking at 3 areas. The first one is at the planning table. As I said, we're engaging now into creating a terms of reference for the very first water sustainability plan in the province. We are working with CVRD, Paper Excellence, Cowichan Tribes to solve the puzzle of the governance and the licensing of the weir. And we're also going to spend a little bit of time and effort on some internal strengthening of our model. I'll speak to that a bit more, but we need a strong organization with strong and committed partners that see themselves in this partnership in order to be effective. Now, just a minute. Whoops. I've lost my, oops. Okay, so the first area was at the planning tables we're going to focus on. The second is on the ground with our work on the ground to maintain robust technical work that provides us the information we need to make the decisions we need to do in order to get where we want to go in the watershed. And so, as I mentioned, we're going to strengthen our target working groups. And also we have resources to set up listening tents, which we're going to do over the summer and to hopefully, COVID permitting, start our speaker series up again, which was really popular with monthly speakers at VIU here. And the idea of the listening tents is to provide community members at the trestle or at the farmer's market to have a source of accurate information about water and watershed issues and somewhere where they can have a dialogue. And the third place where we want to make a difference this year is in the cloud. And so this is not particularly my area of expertise, but we see 2 real opportunities here. First of all, the planning work we've done has really made it evident that there's a lot of information and a lot of good work has been done by CVRD, by the province, by Cowichan Tribes, by the NGOs, and generally the players are ignorant of what everyone else is doing, which isn't the best situation. There are models here in the province for creating data hubs on the Skeena with the Skeena Data Trust in the Okanagan. So we have some resources where we're going to look at reaching out to our partners and seeing if there's an option to just have a better system here in the Cowichan Valley for managing our information. And then secondly, and I mentioned it earlier with Stackway, we are going to double down on our internet presence and our YouTube channel. Like during COVID, we found this has been an extremely useful way of sharing information. And I'm not a tech person, but you can see how many people are visiting your sites daily, and the coverage we've got for the amount of time and resources we've invested in TikTok videos, for instance, is amazing. So we're really going to increase how we do that piece of work. Okay, whoops. So I'm nearing the end of what I've got to share with you. Whoops, see, this has a mind of its own here, sorry. There seems to be a delay in the arrows. Okay. So there's 2 things that I wanted to emphasize that we need to think about, I think collectively, as community leaders, certainly in the Watershed Board. I'm a technical person, so I'm a science guy. But I think in 2022 in the Cowichan Valley around water and watershed issues, it's not all about the science. And it pains me to say that. But we always need good science so that we know what to do. But we have enough science that we kind of know what to do, but we don't seem to be able to actually do it. So I think the social science piece, the ability to find the mechanism to actually move the needle, to actually start to implement the positive change we need to do to ensure sustainable communities for our kids and their kids is the trick. And I think the Watershed Board, as an entity that's linked to government but not government, is an ideal mechanism to do that. And the second thing that I would leave as a takeaway is this partnerships piece that I told you I was going to talk a lot about. What we have planned for this year is we have a resourcing partner, the BC Freshwater Legacy Initiative, that's going to pay for us to host some workshops this fall. So I'm thinking after the election. There's been a lot of turnover. We ran a series of workshops in 2017-18 with senior staff and elected officials from Cowichan Tribes and CVRD that was super constructive. That's where our governance manual came from. That's where our pathways document came from. That's where really our guidance came from. And in my mind, that's still fresh. But you know what? All those players have changed. And so we're going to redo that because I'll never forget that first time around, Lydia Whitsom, now Chief Whitsom, said, you know what? After this work, I see myself in this now. And I think it's equally important that CVRD sees themselves in the Cowichan Watershed Board partnership. And so I think it's worth us investing some time and effort in making sure that's the case. So we're anticipating rolling that out October, November, December. So I'll leave you with a thought. See, I'm way faster than this computer, right? I push the button. There we go. So I think the bottom line is the Watershed Board is CVRD. The Watershed Board is Cowichan Tribes, right? We were created to support you and your partners and to support your interests in water and watershed sustainability. And the discussion you just had reminds me of the broad mandate that you have as community leaders. And when I work with my colleagues at Cowichan Tribes, their mandate is even broader. They're responsible for education, housing, healthcare. The Watershed Board thinks about water and watersheds. And we take that seriously. It's a big responsibility. We appreciate the trust that our partners place in us. And I guess today, I'm looking for your support of the business plan, your support of your contribution of $50,000 to the Watershed Board. And I'm hoping that you share this, the vision that we have for a sustainable water future for our community. And not now, but I will be looking for a commitment for participation in the workshops series from senior staff and elected officials this fall. So with that, I will say Haitsapka CM, thank you very much, and I'd be more than willing to take any questions you might have for me today.
I really appreciate, I always love all your photos. Great job, really good, and thank you. And I know you're in the gym every day at 5 a.m., so you're looking pretty buff there, Tom, so good for you.
Yeah, my wife says skinny, but.
I was saying buff, so, you know, I'm just jealous. And so we will be referring this business plan to our staff, but if there's any questions, if you could take your screen down with your beautiful pictures, I'd turn to the board and ask if you have any questions to Tom. I see Director Wilson. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, thank you, Tom. That was great. I'm just going to say what a great expression techno-fix is. So keep coming up with those and I'll use those myself. Thank you very much. I'm in full support of what you're doing here.
Is there anybody else with questions for Tom? Go ahead, Director Marsh.
Thank you. I don't really have a question for Tom, but every time I see him, I hear he's retiring. So I wanted to thank him for all that he's done in case the next time he actually isn't here and it's someone else.
Thank you.
It's great. And I turn to Director Toporowski.
I also wanted to echo Councillor Marsh's, or Director Marsh's, thanks to Tom. The 8 years of being on the Couch and Watershed Board and him being there in different capacities. And we were lucky enough to rope him in for our executive director for this last little while, and really appreciate your hard work. And you know, when you signed up for the job, it was sort of like I have big shoes to fill from Roger, and you filled those shoes. So I just wanted to say thank you.
That's great. So there was a request here to support the plan here that we would like to refer this to staff because we don't vote on resolutions from delegations. So I'm looking for a referral motion. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. And thank you so much again, Tom.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Great. And with that, oh, our virtual clap. Oh, thank you. Thank you. First forgot about, well, he's live here so he can see some. Thanks again. Okay, we're turning now to actually our next delegation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I've let them in the room, if you will. They're joining us virtually from, I'm not sure, parts unknown. But this is a presentation from Vancouver Fraser Port Authority with regards to their port optimization initiatives. And of the three that have joined us, I'm not sure who's going to lead, or that's maybe one of you might speak up, and who might lead your the discussion in your presentation.
Good afternoon. This will be Shri Madiwal.
Welcome, Shri. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for
it.
Yes.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
I just would like to share the presentation, and then we can get going from there. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Captain Shri Madiwal, and I'm the Director of Marine Operations at the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority. I'm also joined by my colleague, Naomi Hotsford, Manager of Community and Government Relations. And we're also here with some other team members joining virtually on the webcast. Thanks for making time for us today. We acknowledge your interest in this topic and really appreciate the opportunity to provide an update on what we're doing at the Port of Vancouver and what we have heard so far from the early engagement and what we're planning for the engagement going forward for this year. I would first like to acknowledge that the Port of Vancouver and the Anchorages throughout the southern BC transact three traditional and unceded territories of the number of First Nations. My team and I have worked primarily in Vancouver, and I would like to extend a special thanks to Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. Let me begin by starting with our vision. And the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority is a federal agency responsible for the stewardship of lands and waters that makes the Port of Vancouver. And as Canada's largest port, our mandate is to enable Canada's trade through the Port of Vancouver while protecting the environment and considering local communities. And we have taken this mandate a step further with our vision to be the world's most sustainable port. And one would wonder, I mean, the way we have defined the sustainable port means us through the sustainable port definition, that is a healthy environment, thriving communities, and economic prosperity through trade. And we do this through the process of seeking meaningful dialogue to understand shared aspirations and develop collective accountability with our industry partners and host communities. Our role in Southern Gulf Island, so within the Port of Vancouver, we are responsible for all the vessel traffic management and also managing the anchorages. And since 2018, we have also taken up a role to assign anchorages in the Southern Gulf Island in accordance with the Government of Canada's interim protocol. Transport Canada is responsible for the decisions regarding Canada's trade and also for designating anchorages outside the Port Authority's jurisdiction, such as the Southern Gulf Island. And the Coast Guard overall maintains the communications and traffic services and supports emergency response in the event that is required. Recognizing these different multi-jurisdictional authorities, we will continue to work with Transport Canada to develop a new active vessel traffic management system, including keeping them informed as to what we hear from the communities through the engagement process. In terms of our overview on the port optimization initiatives, we are working to focus on the continued growth in Canada's trade and the vessel traffic that are connected to it. And the Port Authority is working with the industry partners and also Transport Canada for the past year to understand what the supply side challenges are and to identify potential opportunities to improving how we can accommodate this growth. And specifically, we are exploring two key areas. One is around the port optimization digitalization initiatives that is designed to kind of make more coordinated planning easier so that the supply chain can be efficient and effectively coordinate and collaborate. And the second one is about the active vessel traffic management. That is going to kind of take and apply prioritization and optimization principles to dictate the vessel movements within the Port Authority's jurisdiction, including improved protocols for vessels when they are at anchor. With some baseline understanding now that has been established on the supply side, in January, we initiated engagement with Indigenous groups, local government, and community stakeholders to help us better understand community interests and concerns with a view of developing a broader public engagement program. Our goal here today is through this engagement is to explore a range of opportunities to increase efficiency and to help better manage the effects of marine shipping on the local communities. Today, as we know, the Port Authority does not have the authority or responsibility to establish or change anchorages outside the jurisdiction, but through the new active vessel traffic management system planning, we are working to develop a new program that clearly defines jurisdiction and assigns that jurisdiction to the most appropriate agency, including responsibilities, accountabilities, and authority. As for our engagement plan, because we are relative newcomers to the Southern Gulf Island, our initial engagement earlier this year was focused on learning about the Southern Gulf Island communities, including meeting with Indigenous groups, local government staff, community stakeholders to understand interests and concerns, to gather input on how and when to best engage with people who live, work, and visit here. Building on what we heard, we'll be launching a public engagement process in the coming days. Our two public information session is scheduled for July 21st and 27th. This inform and engage stage will take place in two parts, as we said in the summer, focus on sharing information, inviting questions and comments, and then of course in September we'll engage on specific aspects of the new system. We'll make the decisions based on what we hear and our ongoing technical consultation with the industry and seek feedback on the draft new system later this fall, winter. Our plan is to implement the new system by early 2023, and additional engagement will take place throughout 2023 and beyond, including reporting out and seeking feedback on performance and potential additional changes. So what we have heard so far, I'd like to take a moment to touch on what we heard during our early engagement this year. These are the slides. It's a very high level points on the screen. It's important to acknowledge this is a very high level summary and acknowledge that there are a lot of layers within each of these points, and the full report is available on our website. I would like to thank everyone who shared their input, including the people we met and some of the staff members as well as with the CVRD for their input and feedback through the AVTM. I acknowledge that some people may have seen the summary as too simplistic, but I assure you it is anything but. An important suggestion that we have specifically responded to is a suggestion to break our next phase of engagement into two parts. First, we're sharing information and understanding more about what's important to people, and then we'll use that information to help us develop potential solutions and options that we will be engaging about this fall. This is the overall framework of our active vessel traffic management system. It's a multi-year, multi-phase project with 5 integrated elements that will be delivered in stage to support the evolution of the marine traffic management within the Port of Vancouver. And these elements have been identified through the various engagement. And to date, the first aspect is about the centralized scheduling system. This includes potential changes on how the vessel traffic movements are sequenced and prioritized at the Port of Vancouver. And as a Port Authority, will be taking an active role in the strategic and operational planning of the vessel movements. in order to reduce the gateway inefficiency, improve traffic flow, and consistency. The next one is around Anchorage management protocol, is to kind of include new reporting requirements for vessels arriving the port, assignment protocols, code of conduct for the vessels at anchor. The collaboration and incentives is more for the supply chain partners to support efficiency, data sharing, coordination, collaboration to kind of improve the supply chain. The port call optimization aspect is also called a just-in-time arrival. This is something that we have heard loud and clear from many of the residents in the Southern Gulf Island and some of the best practices around the world. And this is more about process integration between all the supply chain partners, greater predictability of the vessel activity, and also facilitate the just-in-time or a quick turnaround of the vessels when they are in port. And lastly, it's about the port community system, where we support a greater information sharing between all the supply chain partners and better plan for coordination and collaboration. So our next steps. Just bear with me. Our next steps in the summer engagement is to primarily be online with 2 sessions, which I mentioned in July 21st and 27. And then later on, we'll be reaching out to the communities through advertising, social media, and achieving broad-based and informed participation for our engagement this fall. And in September, we'll incorporate an online survey, in-person open houses, online meetings to seek input and feedback on specific elements of the new system summarized in the previous slide. Overall, we are expecting that once the program has been implemented collectively, these initiatives are intended to strengthen marine safety by reducing congestion in the busiest and most confined waterways through changes into how we actually manage the vessel movements, and also improving compliance and monitoring. Reducing environmental impact is key by limiting vessel movements within the southern resident killer whale habitat. Efficiency and reliability of the goods movement is key and very topical today with the supply chain challenges. And this is where we are trying to work by optimizing linkages between rail, road, marine traffic, and reducing the vessel wait times at anchorages. Social impacts, it's by implementing measures to reduce noise, light, as I mentioned earlier, and also understand some of the community disruptive activities of vessels at anchor. And lastly, as the largest port in Canada, we need to kind of ensure that the port competitiveness is maintained by improving service quality with better tools, infrastructure, and adding value for customers, and continue to sustain the 115,000 plus jobs that rely on the Vancouver Gateway. Lastly, I would like to say thank you for your time today, and I look forward to hearing your feedback and ideas and to meeting with you again later this fall. For those who are watching online and want more information, we invite you to visit our website, and all the details are available there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Good timing. Practice that one right down to the 10 minutes exactly. Okay, I turn to the board, and if there's any questions, I have Director Sebring and then Director Wilson. Director Sebring, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you.
Stone and Toporowski, sorry.
No problem. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Madiwal, and a very encouraging report, if I can put it that way. We in North Cowichan, and I know Director Stone and Lady Smith and our Member of Parliament, Alistair McGregor, and I think even her predecessor have been raising this issue for a number of years. And when I look at your final slide, it's apparent to me that we finally have your attention, and that's encouraging. It took a long time to get here. There are some commitments in that final slide that, if they come to fruition, I think will go a long way toward addressing some of the concerns that we've had. I'm pleased to see that you've started the First Nations engagement. That was long overdue. There are serious issues there, as you know, and that has to be a priority, and I'm glad you've made it one. But that has to be integrated with broader public input, and I'm glad you're working on that with these online engagements coming up. It's just good to see that this file is finally moving off dead center. I met with your boss, ostensibly, I don't know, the head of the Port of Vancouver, whoever that was, I can't remember, at a Ports Canada reception at FCM in Quebec City in 2019. and raised the issue again there, and that wasn't the first time. And, I was assured that things were going to improve, and frankly, to this point, they haven't. But what I'm seeing in your report is that you're working on it, and that's all we can ask. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ray. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you. I turn to Director Wilson. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Sri. That was a good presentation, and I fully appreciate the problems that you're working in with the confined waters and the amount of trade which comes through Vancouver. I'm just wondering, and I'm sure the answer is yes, but have you studied and talked with your counterparts in the very, very high traffic ports of Hong Kong, Singapore, that kind of thing, to see how they handle things? Because they've got pretty much the same kind of situation. But I'm also glad that Director Sebring has touched on the points that we consider locally here, such as the Anchorage is here, and I'm hoping that something will be done, something about that. But basically, what collaboration do you have with people like DP Ports and things like that, who have a lot of experience in this kind of handling? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your question. And I think we are working on identifying all the best practices. So we're looking at Rotterdam, we are looking at Newcastle on the vessel arrival system. We are working with LA Long Beach on some of those initiatives. So we are looking at all the ports in the world to kind of see how they manage the traffic. I think the uniqueness of the Port of Vancouver is that it is the most diversified port in North America. We have 5 different business sectors. And so we need to kind of ensure how those business sectors needs to be addressed. The other thing is we need to ensure that the port is still competitive for our shippers, and our shippers, whether you talk about grain, coal, fertilizers, which is like at the highest benchmark right now of the sale price. Canada itself is not a price dictator in the world's economy. So our shippers don't generally get that buy-in. So whatever system works in the different ports, we need to kind of take that and adapt into our local environment to ensure that we don't lose the competitiveness. We still offer those options to our shippers to remain competitive in the world scale, and how we can still address this community issues and the impact on the environment. So absolutely, we are looking at all options and considering both the technological changes, but also the process changes.
I turn to Director Stone, then Toporowski, then Marsh.
Thanks. I've got a lot of notes here, but unlike my colleague, Director Sebring, I'm skeptical. We were told when we met with Minister Garneau here in 2018 that this was an interim protocol that I think was set to expire the following February, and here we are, I think 3 years after that expiry, that the issues continue to persist along East Vancouver Island and the Southern Gulf Islands. I know our MPs are actively engaged, but I grew up here. I watched the ships come to these points of anchor and quickly depart. But the volume and the impacts and the seemingly, poor behavior of the vessels when they are moored here is definitely a lot different than it was when we grew up here. I get that the port is growing, but I think that when we talk about environmental sustainability, I'm not sure that expanding the social and environmental impacts throughout a sensitive ecosystem is really a positive step forward for the port. It definitely isn't a positive step forward for residents and flora and fauna of the Southern Gulf Islands and Eastern Vancouver Island. So I'm very supportive of the port overall, but I think that I'm skeptical of this engagement. It seems like more of work to justify the interim protocol and continuing with it than actually listening to the communities and protecting the environment for the long term. So I'd be very happy to be proven differently. But to this point, I think that we have to look at the evidence that's before us, and for over 3 years now, the interim protocol has continued to increase the level of traffic and moorages within the Southern Gulf Islands and along Eastern Vancouver Island, and continued to have poor impacts on qualities of life for all of those that live here, and not just including all of the residents, but all of the, like I said, the flora and fauna and all of our deep sea creatures as well. So I'll continue to engage in the process. It feels like it's a bit of a marathon with little improvement so far, but I'm hopeful that we can see some improvement and some respect for the communities that have been deeply impacted by the moorage of vessels. What we see and hear on a daily and a weekly basis from our residents is light noise pollution, marine pollution, and it's observed and demonstrable. Seems to be no oversight by the port on these moorages, and very little adherence to the guidelines that are in place for the moorages. So there's definitely a lot of work to do to close the gap between what is being promised and what is actually happening in reality. But I'll remain skeptical until proven otherwise. So I look forward to further engagements, but I'd much rather see further improvements into the situation that's currently in front of us. Thanks.
Thank you. I turn to Director Toporowski.
Thank you. I don't know how to follow that, but did you have something to say, Chair?
Well, no, I just wondered if Cherie had a I kind of cut him off. I don't know if there was any comment afterwards or.
No, I just wanted to kind of thank Director Stone for his comment, and I can't comment on what the past engagement was, but my commitment to this group here is that we'll continue to engage with the local communities on this file. I think the bigger issue that Director Stone also brought up is around the jurisdiction. So here we're still working with Transport Canada, because once the jurisdiction issue has been addressed, there are a lot of things that is available within our toolkits that we can actually effectively implement even without a regulatory or a legislative change. So, but I think those things need to be sorted out, and we're continuously working with transport on that issue as well. Thank you.
Thank you. My apologies, Director Toporowski. Go ahead now, please.
No worries. Thank you. Yeah, so you touched on designated anchorages outside of the port. If I heard you correctly, you said you weren't in charge of that, and also listening and learning from Indigenous communities with their interests and concerns with the areas that we live in. And I was just wondering if one question that I have, and I have a couple of them, sorry, Chair, do you get notification of the letters previously even from the CVRD, local municipalities, or First Nations on concerns about anchorages, noise, light and air quality affected by these anchorages? So I was just wondering if that's going to be included in your update with moving forward. Before you answer that question, I know DFO is really scrambling to try to catch up to the United Nations Declarations of the Rights of Indigenous People. So I know probably the port has been notified of moving forward with these initiatives and how things are to be changed and, I guess, brought up to date, I guess, and caught up with everybody else. Because I gotta say, we're all learning together and moving forward. And my second question, or would you like to answer this one first?
Sure, I can. Thank you very much for your questions. I think, yes, we do have all the historical information because we were part of all the engagement during the interim protocol as well, and also all the complaint that comes through our system. So we have a good understanding on what the issues are and what the historical position has been. So we are going to kind of take that into account as well as we get into the engagement and solution development. And in my slide of the proposed solution, you'll see that some of those aspects that what we heard is already included as part of a design framework. In terms of the DRIPA, the second part of your question, I know the BC province has brought up the action plan. This is going to be part of the federal engagement in some shape or form with transport. So we'll need to kind of look at when transport comes up with their federal action plan. So we'll have to kind of wait from them on their direction. Naomi, would you like to add anything there?
No, Shri, thank you. I think you covered it. Just maybe just a comment to say that we do monitor and we are very aware and do what we can within the protocol guidelines in terms of addressing complaints. So it's not that we're not involved. It's just we are doing the best we can in terms of the context that we're working within.
second question, Director Toporowski, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. So just looking at past impacts, I'll use Cowichan Bay as an example with Anchorage's. I know that there has been some changes, and I know that you're not directly involved with DFO and setting those up. But being at the table now and listening to concerns for the community, can you bring those concerns and issues to the DFO table? I'm going to say, you know, I heard from a few people from Cowichan Bay, and also probably Area Director D probably heard a lot about the noise, the light, and just having that noise at night, because we sleep with our windows open. And that's what the constituents said, you know, where they sleep with their windows open and they couldn't have the windows open because of the noise. The other complaint that was the site of someone dumping something off of these ships that are anchored there. One of the referral technicians from Cowichan Tribes mentioned the damage for the anchors that drag when they're anchored there. So, you know, the traditional food is not accessible anymore because of pollution and whatnot that hits the shore. And, you know, I'm happy and optimistic with the talks moving forward. And I look to solutions on how we can repair and bring some of this seafood back to Cowichan. And, you know, the other territories, Ladysmith, Nanaimo, all of these places where the Port of Vancouver has anchorages. Chemainus, I, you know, drove to the store yesterday and looked out in the bay and seen them anchored out there. And we have had so many constituents contact us in regards to the noise pollution and the pollution being dumped. And there isn't anything that we could do with that. And, you know, I don't know, that's where I'm at. I'm just curious on you know, your solution with that. Is there going to be something that you'll be able to work with the First Nations and the communities that are there? We're all ocean connected here on looking at repairing things, being involved in that. Yeah, so thanks.
Yeah. I'll try my best to answer all the points here, but let me first go on the noise and light complaints. So I think we do receive those things. We manage the records. We try to work, as Naomi mentioned, as much as possible with the vessel owner and also with the communities to address those issues. As part of this program, and by the way, this issue has been well known to transport as well. So we work with them regularly to kind of understand what the issues are with the local communities. Out of this program, there's going to be a renewed or an enforceable kind of a code of conduct. So a lot of things that was there in previous code of conduct, we'll be kind of ramping that up, and also using some of the tools for compliance, monitoring, and also enforcement. So I think that is the piece that is missing in the Southern Gulf Island. And while these anchorages are used by the vessels calling the Port of Vancouver, these anchorages does not come under the VFPA jurisdiction. So we cannot actually enforce anything because this is outside of a mandate, outside of a jurisdiction. We can definitely get challenged in a court by any vessel owner if we try to ask them to do something else in the Southern Gulf Islands, especially around movements, etc. So we are working on that aspect as well. In terms of your seabed, again, we have heard that loud and clear. I think DFO has also heard about those concerns, and apparently, or from my understanding, DFO is actually doing some studies in Plumber Sound in a couple of those anchorages to understand the long-term impact of vessel anchor dragging in the seabed. We'll be guided by those outcomes, and we'll work with DFO to see how and what changes we can bring into these areas as well. But again, we remain committed, though it's not part of our jurisdiction. We do understand that those vessels call the Port of Vancouver, and we definitely want to work with the communities and indigenous folks to kind of see how we can reduce those impacts. Thank you.
Thank you. I turn to Director Smith to close.
You had me after Director
Sorry,
Chapter.
Director Marsh. Yes, my apologies. Marsh and then Smith.
No worries. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Shri. And I can't see your fellow presenter's name right now.
Ms.
I guess they just
Horsford.
saw it from you. Thank you for coming. It's been 10 years since I've been a councillor in the municipality of North Cowichan. And in my first year, I was involved with a group from the federal parks, making the areas around the Gulf Islands marine parks. And I've just looked it up and they are listed as marine parks. So it seems to me to have vessels anchoraged in marine parks is kind of a odd thing. I want to ask you a few questions and then just make a statement about what it's like for us in Chemainus. We have a few beaches and, well, I'll say that first. We have a few beaches here, and given some of the behaviors that we see happening, I think there's many of us that don't feel particularly safe being on the beach anymore. I'm looking out here, and if I was Frank Aaron, I could hit a baseball bat onto the ship that's just outside just right in front of my property a little ways. So is it correct that these ships actually pay no moorage?
Okay, so in terms of the moorage, yes, that's true. There is not we don't have a separate anchorage fee for vessels calling in the Port of Vancouver, but that is generally covered under the harbor dues that they pay for using the port facilities or the common infrastructure.
So how long are they allowed to stay in one spot?
So are we talking about the Southern Gulf Island, or are you talking about referring to the VFPA jurisdiction?
I'm talking about the Southern Gulf Island and these ships that I see outside my windows.
Yeah, so in this case, again, it comes under Transport Canada's responsibility, and as per Transport Canada interpretation, a vessel can and is allowed to anchor and stay for a reasonable period of time.
What do they consider reasonable, Shri?
I have no idea. I wish I had an answer for that.
Okay, so I think what I got that's new information for me is that you really don't have much authority over these ships.
No, we don't. Our responsibility is only about assigning the anchorages in an equitable manner.
I see. Do you know if there is a wastewater disposal regulation? In other words,
Yes.
are they prevented from dumping what sometimes looks to us like wastewater? Where are they supposed to be taking that?
Yeah, so all the vessels that comes or calls the Port of Vancouver is also have to comply with the regulations or the discharge regulations that comes under the Canada Shipping Act, and they follow those regulations.
So can you tell me how often and where are they dumping their black water?
I think it will depend on various scenarios for the ships, depending on what type of treatment plant they have. But most of the vessels, I would say, would retain their gray water on board.
Okay, one last question, and I know we're not a very friendly audience maybe today, but how do you feel? What is the reason that these ships come from somewhere overseas and they have to stay here for weeks and weeks and weeks on end? And how does that affect the inflation that Canadians and British Columbians are paying for goods? Because I'm assuming those sailors are being paid for their time that they're manning these ships sitting empty in our waters.
Yeah, no, that's a fair question that we also ask around the competitiveness of the port. And definitely, in addition to the sailor, there's also cost to keep the ship waiting. And the industry definitely pays a demurrage for every single day that the vessel stays in port, in addition to all the other costs associated to it. And the supply chain is a very complex issue, right from the farm to the vessel. There's so many supply chain partners involved, right from the producers to the elevators to the railways to the trucking to the vessel movement, how the commercial arrangements are there between the sale and purchase. Is the seagoing portion of the transportation is covered by the buyers sitting somewhere in Asia, or is it managed by the shipper who's actually residing in Canada? Who gives the incentive for a quick turnaround? Who pays for the vessel movement? So again, all I'm saying is it's a very complicated issue, but definitely any time the vessel waits in port, there is a cost associated to it that someone is paying, and that definitely adds up to the overall cost of a sale of goods going from Canada. And most of the anchorages are for the export commodities.
Oh, they're picking up things and taking them. They're not bringing things.
The bringing things is mostly the container vessels and some car carriers, but generally we don't see that as an congestion or anchorage use, except in the last year due to the supply chain challenges and the weather events that we had in 2021.
May I ask one more question that arose now, Madam Chair, quickly? So I don't quite understand, if they're here to pick up goods and we are in the 21st century, why they can't find out ahead of time if the goods they're coming to get are prepared for them to pick them up.
Yeah, I think it's also specific to the individual commodities, Director, because the green ship, when it comes, they also need to ensure that the ship is clean. They need a vessel to be certified by the CFI. Only then the vessel is supposed to be ready for loading. The railways has to kind of deliver the goods to the terminal. Only then the ship can be brought in. Sometimes they have a change of goods, so they need to kind of option to kind of bring another ship. So again, as I said, we are working with all our industry partners to see how we can actually streamline this activity. Having data, having better predictability, having coordination and collaboration can reduce these issues, and the supply chain can be more efficient as we go along. Thank you.
I hope that happens. Thank you.
Thank you. I turn to Director Smith to close.
Thank you very much. That's a good segue into that Area G in the Cowichan Valley Regional District probably has the most shoreline that's impacted by the anchorages, with 9 Gulf Islands and 10 kilometers of oceanfront for Saltaire. The issues with the ships being anchored between Thetis Island and Valdez Island, having 6-story buildings with their lights on, their generators. It's just not even, it isn't even an ability to have a good sleep at night. And I know that you're indicating that, Transport Canada has control over one. The Canada Shipping Act is something else. This is really hard on our communities. It's impacting their mental health. It's impacting our environment. And so we need to see changes. And I'm not sure. I thought that we were hoping to have a meeting with possibly Transport Canada to go over some of the anchorages and the stay and some of those parts. So it's just devastating for our communities. And I live way up on a hill looking down, and I can hear the generators reverberating, and I can see the lights at night. So I can't imagine having a multi-million-dollar home on oceanfront, having that as your nightly go-to-sleep type of situation. So that was my rant for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd also like to, I appreciate your presentation, Mr. Madiwal and Ms. Horsford, got that straight. And you can sort of hear, I appreciate your presentation, and you sort of hear our frustration. It's been ongoing. I myself am the area director for Cowichan Bay, but I know that everybody is working on this, and it has been a long-standing issue in my area as well. So we appreciate you coming, and thank you so much.
Appreciate your time.
Virtual clap for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And with that, we will take a 10-minute break. Cued the hamster yet.
Madam Chair, do you want me to do electoral area services?
Yes, please. I will be calling on you. That's what we do. That's my buffering. That's mine's not. Oh dear, don't do that again. I don't know. It's got a mind of its own.
It's like we can hear you, but you're no longer on the screen, Lori.
Oh.
Oh, there. No.
Something, I'm sorry, something's going on with my computer too. But I
But I can see her. Aaron, I see you, Lori.
It's been a WebEx issue.
Yeah, my
Intermittently.
actual computer is is showing me 4 people. The CVRD on the podium is showing everyone. So I will try and we're live. Welcome back, everyone. And we will continue to move on now to CR2, Report and Recommendation of Electoral Area Services Committee. And I turn to the alternate.
Madam Chair,
Yes?
don't we have to do CR1 first?
Yes,
Oh, oopsie. Okay, CR1. Report from the Committee of the Whole, and I turn to Director Sebring. Or
Actually, I defer to Director Stone. He chaired this one. I wasn't here for that meeting, Director Stone.
Yeah, thank you. There's the 2 recommendations there. I can read them out, or I would just move those 2 recommendations.
just move them, please.
So moved.
Is there a seconder? Been moved and seconded. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. Now, I turn.
I was actually trying to get a question in.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yes, go ahead. I was looking up at the big screen because my people aren't on here, so do interrupt me if I haven't seen you. Go ahead.
So
Director
sorry.
Martin.
That was Community as a Whole for which date? I'm trying to stay on the agenda here.
June 22nd.
Thank you. No question.
Okay. I turn to Mr. Robbins so that I get this correct. And
You're moving to CR2, which is the report and recommendations of the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of July 6th, 2022. And I believe Director Acton is going to move these recommendations.
go ahead, Director Acton.
Thank you. I would like to move number 1 through 10, please.
It's been moved. Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Any questions? I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion's carried. Go ahead, Director Acton.
And this is for electoral area directors only, number 11 to 15.
Been moved. Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. Thank you. Mr. Robbins, where are we?
We're moving through 11 direct reports, but there are nothing listed. 12 staff reports, nothing listed. We go to agenda item 13, which are public hearings. And the public hearings, PH 1 through PH 4.
Okay.
Would you like me to?
Do we need them read, or are we okay with 1 through 4? Everyone's got them in front of them? We okay with that? Yes, go ahead. So that, see a mover, second, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion's carried.
Under 14 bylaws, there is nothing. Under 15 bylaws, electoral area directors,
We do read those.
BEA 1 through BEA 6.
Okay. Is there a mover? Second, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion's carried.
Item 16, resolutions, there is nothing listed and nothing under 17, unfinished business. There are no notices of motion under 18. Under 19, added at the beginning of your agenda were new businesses R2, R3, and R4.2 from the Committee of the Whole earlier this morning.
Turn to Director Sebring, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. These were discussed in Committee of the Whole earlier this morning and passed in deference to the fact that they are not on the agenda for the board. And if anybody's watching, I will read and move each recommendation separately, if that's okay with you, just in the interest of transparency. The first recommendation is that the 2022 budget for function 515 repair and maintenance be amended to increase purchased repairs by $226,235 and to increase transfer from operating reserves by $226,235. And I'll move that.
It's been moved, seconded by Director Stone. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried.
Second resolution from today's Committee of the Whole meeting, it's time sensitive, that the 2022 budget for function 515 garbage and waste collection be amended to increase vehicle purchases by $141,351.76, and that we increase transfer from operating reserves by that same amount. And I'll move it.
It's been seconded by Director Stone again. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried.
And the final resolution that was time sensitive from today's Committee of the Whole meeting is under R4 in that agenda, sub-bullet 3, and that is that Patrick Robbins and Rosa Johnston be appointed as alternate Deputy Chief Election Officers, alternate Deputy Regional Voting Officers for the 2022 general local elections and assent voting.
Moved, seconded. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried.
And that's the report from Committee of the Whole, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And we are now,
I have a question.
go ahead.
Sorry, items 1 and 2 of that last one weren't read out?
That's because they weren't time sensitive. The staff had asked us specifically that we do bullet 3 there because it's time sensitive. There's a bunch of stuff they need to get to work on with respect to both election and assent voting preparation, that they need these titles assigned to Mr. Robbins and Ms. Johnston as quickly as possible. So that's why this went to the board at this meeting. The other 2 resolutions that were debated with respect to the regional recreation referendum will come to the next board meeting.
Thank you very much for that clarity.
All right.
Okay. Mr. Robbins.
Agenda item 20 is question period, and I'm not, we don't have anybody electronically, and I'm not sure if anybody in the
Come forward if you
gallery
have a
would have a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question regarding the minutes of the previous meeting, where there was, it was moved and seconded that the staff seek clarification through legal opinion on the recommendation 22367 as to which directors were able to vote on this matter. So my question is, does the board still rise and report on matters, and will the public be made aware of what that legal opinion was?
No, I don't believe, I'm not sure. We haven't actually even finished that agenda. We didn't even get finished with that Committee of the Whole.
No, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, this was not the Committee of the Whole. This was the board, last board meeting, and it was in regards to the cell tower.
I'll have to get clarification on that one because it was a legal matter. I'd clarify if we were going to rise with report or not, and someone will get back to you.
Okay, thank you. And Madam Chair, if I may, I wish to clarify my position on the cell tower, and then I will ask a question after that. I was not against a cell tower in Satlam area. I was concerned about the placement of that cell tower in a residential area.
I think we got that message. What's
Thank
your
you.
question?
So my question is, a lot of the people were thinking that this cell tower would provide coverage, I think, for the length of Highway 18. We heard today from TELUS that that will require a series of cell towers. So my question, and I believe it was maybe put forward that there was a motion to move forward on a policy, but it was rejected. Ms. Cheryl made a comment to that, but I wasn't sure. So was there?
There is a policy coming forward with our MOCP, and staff were looking into it, so I'm not sure if it's going to come before our MOCP, if I was clear with September.
So would that, so it
that would be ahead of our MOCP, yes.
It would be ahead. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Yes.
That was what I was working towards.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to ask a question on the agenda today? Seeing none, a motion to,
Motion to
go
adjourn.
into close, back into closed. Isn't it?
Correct.
So a motion to go back into closed. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion's carried.
Just a minor process piece, Madam Chair. We're going into closed committee of the whole.
Actually, we didn't finish
No.
closed board, did we?
We didn't finish closed board. We were going back and closed board, and committee of the whole is going to be Mr. Robbins.
It's at your discretion. You can go back to the closed committee of the whole or the closed.
We should have
board.
actually said, to send it to.
I thought we moved our items to the board.
We didn't exactly.
No.
So we should have done that, but we didn't. So we will have, what are we going to do now?
Madam Chair, if I may?
Yeah.
I would advise that we go to the committee of the whole first.
Okay.
From a logistics point of view from staff.
Okay. So we are actually going to resume back with committee of the whole closed.
Madam Chair, do we
Then we
leave
will
this
be
meeting?
doing closed board, but I think we have to stay in here. I'm not sure. Do we have to go back into the closed? We have to go back into the closed of committee of the whole. I have everybody back on my screen now.
Correct, Madam Chair. So once we stop this meeting, if you could follow the link for the
Your-
closed committee of the whole.
Thank you, and we will direct you
WebEx
from
meeting.
there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Director Stone.
And once again, I'll be recusing for committee